All right, today we have a new apologetics question, number 29. The question is, should all Christians get married? So I found this one a little bit interesting because if you look at our church and the way ministries are set up, and actually I've heard comments from a single older man who was kind of bothered by this, about how the church was so set up for families and like family ministry. Like it was completely structured around marriage and kids, like everything we do. So, what do you think about that? Is that on purpose? Is that a reaction to the majority of Christians being married and having families? What if you don't get married? What if you don't have children? Is that wrong or bad? Like, is it less good? Maybe if it's not bad, like, what is marriage and its recommendations for Christians? Is it the best option? What does the Bible say about it? Does that make sense? Any thoughts on this? Have you ever thought about this and ever wondered about this? Addison,
I've always related this to should have Christians have kids.
Oh yeah, so we can talk about that too, I guess, a little bit. Should they have kids? Well, it's interesting. We've been studying the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and there's so much like pressure on them to have kids, and then God doesn't give them kids for so long, even though He's promised them a family. So it's like, I don't know, 60, 80 years for Abraham and Sarah. And then I know Isaac and Rebecca have to wait 20 years before they have kids. So it's interesting how God is involved in that. But specifically, marriage. Should all Christians get married? And then, from that point, like, what if you're getting older and you still haven't found someone, like, and you desire someone, like, is it a guarantee that God would give you a husband or a wife? Like, what role does God play in that? Or could He have other things in mind for you as a single person? So let's define our terms. Marriage. What is marriage? This is the straight up definition. The legally or formally recognized union of two people as partners in a personal relationship. You may know in our country now, marriage is not just restricted to a man and a woman. So this adds historically and in some jurisdictions specifically a union between a man and a woman. So it's interesting that no longer is that defined. Now the biblical definition of marriage would say a man and a woman. It would not open up that door to other unions between same sex or anything else.
Partners.
Or multiple. Yeah, actually that's a question I thought we could talk about too. Polygamy. So that's maybe as a follow-up, should we look at the polygamy in the Bible? Because there is people who have more than one wife in the Bible. And okay, next week let's do that, and it'll be a tag on to this. Here's the straight up biblical definition from Genesis, so from the very beginning, about the first married couple. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So, like that was before there was a government to like write them a marriage certificate, but it was before God in a covenant relationship, and it involved sexual relations too. So that is the end there. Become one flesh is referring to that, and that is how God designed it from the very beginning. From the first couple, He designed them to be married. So obviously, God values marriage. He created marriage, but we need marriage to survive, right? Procreation, because people only live so long. They need to have kids. Otherwise, the world would have ended with Adam and Eve. And there would have been no more people. So, thinking of all those things, marriage is ordained by God, but is it for everyone? Is kind of our question and our focus. So, some of the challenges, we hit it a little bit. It seems like our churches are set up for marriage and families rather than singleness. Like, you look at our ministries, we have,
Ours are actually like, our church is fine. Like, I think about that.
We have a young marrieds class.
There you go.
We have men's ministries and women's ministries that would be open to single people, right?
I think the church camp out is one that, like, I remember Mr. Blankers, after he was widowed, like, people were like, you know, what's his first name?
Daryl.
Daryl, but like, please still come to the church camp out, Daryl. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
But I think, so he's back in that single spot where maybe he's not invited to many dinner parties or to things. I think there's some challenges.
Yeah, okay. Like, we've done things like the dinners for 8. It's kind of seem like they're geared for couples, right? That was actually one of the things that came up as a note to be like, hey, this isn't just for couples. Like, it was kind of worded in a way like, oh, 4 couples get put together for dinner. And then, like, we kind of changed the wording of it to make it open to single people too. What else? The church had a Valentine's Day thing, which was clearly for married couples. But, you know, like, we do have a lot of, like, all ages ministries that involve children. Just, I mean, so technically, if you're single, you wouldn't be. But all the people in the children's ministry are single, so I don't know.
I remember there was like a father-son event or a father-daughter event. So that's kind of like a parenting and a kid thing. So that would exclude, like, someone who didn't have a kid would be like, oh, that sounds fun to go bowling with people from the church, but I don't have. No. Wasn't it a father-son event?
Well, I don't have sons.
Right.
Yeah.
It was bowling, and I wanted to.
So, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because not every ministry is going to be for everyone. So, you know, like, preschool ministry is for the preschool kids. I can't get upset that I can't go to the preschool ministry, even though they have snacks that are delicious. I want animal crackers. Come on. But, like, we should look at the church. The church should be, you know, ministering to everyone in every stage. So the church shouldn't be only exclusively somehow have ministries for married people. And some people might look at the church and see it. There's so many families, right? There's so many married people with kids that's the norm. Like the church camp out is a good example. Like, generally, the people who are there, well, no, it's pretty. There's like retired people without kids too, but maybe the majority could become
retired people. They're a couple.
I know, but like being just one group, like only available. There are some ministries that we separate ages or demographics for, and some ministries that are just open to all. So something to be just careful of, that like we don't have an active like singles ministry at our church. Some do. But it's one thing that's interesting about singles ministry, and this is a criticism I've heard of like churches who have singles ministry, is it's like a ministry designed to pair people up. And it's like the goal of that singles ministry to get people married, right? But generally, culturally, we live in Linden. Like the pressure to get married and have kids is pretty high on people, right? Like, and this could be an interesting thing if you experience being single in your 20s or 30s. Like, you're going to have pressure from your family, maybe your church too, maybe people like, do you have a boyfriend yet? And then, you know, when you're young marrieds, a lot of those couples get pressure like, when are you gonna have kids? Like there are these like cultural expectations on single people or young marrieds. Yes.
When you said like, do you have a boyfriend yet? Like something grandma, I can see grandma saying.
Yeah.
Yes,
You know, like
Back off, Grandma.
it is interesting. So the church can do that too, either individuals in the church or maybe the way the church is set up to put this pressure on single people that makes it like they don't value singleness. So we're going to get to the Bible and see what it says about singleness, about marriage.
I was reading 1 Corinthians yesterday, and I know a lot about what Paul has to say.
Okay.
So if you guys have been reading your Bibles,
There's some
probably
verses
answered this
in 1 Corinthians for sure.
Well, there's nothing in
Oh, the other challenges, I don't think I've gotten it. So, is marriage or singleness the best biblical option? Which one does the Bible say is best? We're going to look at some verses, and we may be able to answer that. Okay, and again, we've talked about this a bunch, but the one that we wrote down, the challenge to summarize that, is singleness affirmed in our communities, right? Or is only marriage and family? And that can be hard if the majority of people are one way. Who thinks the majority of people in our church are single? If you include all the kids, it
You
helps.
include
But
all the
who thinks the majority of the people in our church are married? And usually with kids. That would be the norm, right? You'd see that is just typical norm in. What do you think about society? Not our church, but general society. Is singleness affirmed more in society than the church?
Yes.
Yeah, I think probably so. Maybe for different reasons, right? Like general society would be totally okay with, two people living together and not being married, where the church would encourage a couple to get married before they live together. Actually, they would desire that and say it's biblical to be married before they live together. Whereas the world would say, you can live together, you can have sex, whatever, before you're married. So there's a reason why the church might have a greater emphasis on marriage, because we believe that's an important first step to a progression in a relationship. Not first step, but before other things happen. So that's an interesting thought. And then the last one: does marriage or singleness keep or allow? That doesn't really make sense.
I know.
I wrote it down.
Certain opportunities.
Keep.
That word keep.
Keep is not right.
Yeah.
Stop or allow certain opportunities.
Sure.
We're gonna change that. Everyone.
How rude.
So you think about
Prevent.
prevent or allow certain opportunities. So are certain options of ministry available to you if you're married or single? For example, I have a friend. So I'm going to show my cards a little bit here. I have a friend who is single. He is older than me. How old is he? Darren Weil.
Oh yeah, Darren's the best.
He is a youth pastor. He's been a youth pastor. That's how I got to know him. He was a youth pastor in Chicago. Yeah. He is, basically, I think he desired to be married, but he never did. He never found someone. And now I've talked to him. He feels like he is committed to singleness. And that's what God has planned for him. He has had a very difficult time when he was looking for a new church to be a youth pastor in with his singleness. Basically people, he's had a lot of youth ministry experience. He had a lot of biblical education. He had his master's degree in Old Testament theology and stuff. Very educated, solid teacher. Had a very difficult time finding a youth ministry job solely because he was not married. That the churches would look at him and be like, you're kind of a weird guy. What's wrong with you? Because you're not married.
Also,
What is wrong with you that you couldn't find a wife? And does that cause weirdness? Is there no accountability for you because you don't have a wife? Is this going to be a problem? Are you going to try to date the students? What's going to go on? Probably weird concerns for him in that role. And it made it very difficult for him to find churches. He looked for, it was over a year he was actively searching. And he had the experience, had the education, had the qualifications, everything but the fact that he was not married. He really felt like it kept him from getting a youth ministry job. Yes?
Were you married before you became youth pastor?
Yes, I was.
Were you married before mom? I'm like, no.
So interesting too. For me, an example, I got hired really young here as a youth pastor. I know some people look at, how old was I?
21.
I was 21. I had just turned 21 that month that I got hired as a youth pastor here. Would people have taken me seriously if I hadn't been married? Or is that you must be more mature because you're actually married? Is it a stamp of approval that people look at you differently because he's that 21-year-old single guy? Would I have gotten this job?
Maybe not. But
Henry thinks no.
Married with a kid suddenly is
so
you have your life together.
Now there is some validity to that, right?
A month.
Clearly I had more responsibilities. So did it make me more responsible? Maybe. I don't know. It is interesting to look at that.
We're talking about
this perception,
here,
right?
Is Darren perceived to be less good of a youth pastor because he's not married? Is Brian perceived to be better because he is? So marriage has something that goes with it, right? There's perception. That's the heart of it.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at the verses. Let's see what the Bible says about this. So who would like to look up and read Genesis 1:27-28 for us? Ellie. Who would Who would like to look up Genesis 2:18? Addison. Who would like to look up Ecclesiastes 4:9? Maya. Who would like to look up Proverbs 30:18 and 19? Are you stretching, Georgia? I think she's stretching. Marshall. Proverbs 30. Who wants to look up 1 Corinthians 7:6-9? Wiley. Who wants to look up 1 Corinthians 7:32-35? Jessica. Is that because you just read this?
Yeah, I just read Corinthians 1-7 yesterday.
Nice.
Hot off the press.
Hot off the press. Okay. Fresh.
So you know, this has been printed a long time ago, guys, just so you know.
Yes, it's true. 2,000 years off the press.
It's my mind.
Off the reeds.
In the brain.
No, the Bible is written on papyrus, which is made of reeds.
Oh, read. I thought you meant like you're reading.
Oh.
Yeah.
I totally misunderstood. Oh, look, it was right there. What do you know?
Nice. Okay, Ellie. First Genesis. Genesis 1:27-28.
So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule the fish of the earth, the birds of the sky, and every creature that crawls on the earth."
Okay. So, I love this.
Can we vote if they're neutral or yes or no's? I just thought it'd be kind of
Okay, we can put, sure, let's put the verse. Is it affirming marriage as the best option or singleness as the best option in each verse?
Or is it like only presenting one, I guess, right? What is it presenting in this one?
Right.
They should get married.
Right. It's hard to be fruitful and multiply if you don't get married and have a wife and have
In our
babies.
culture right now, people are fruitful and multiplying without marriage. That's a whole other topic.
and getting married and not having kids, right? Like
Right.
that's an interesting choice too. So this is interesting, right? Because this is a biblical command from God. Blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth." Right? Impossible to do without marriage. So does this verse affirm marriage is the best option or singleness is the best option?
Marriage.
It doesn't even present singleness.
Yeah.
It's the only option.
Right.
Marriage.
Here's what you do.
Now, who was on the earth at this time? Adam and Eve. So was this a greater command or to all?
Well, there's only 2 people and I needed to repopulate, so.
It was necessary, very necessary then. Is it so necessary now?
Yes.
If one person decides to not have kids, will humanity go extinct?
No.
Yes.
At this time, yes, if they decided to not have kids. But now, no. But it was a command to all of humanity at the time, so I think it still does continue as a biblical command.
God
But
said to them.
This was like really, Brian taught me something like a year ago that like blew my mind, because sometimes people are like, this is like literally my mom. She's like, well, God says to be fruitful and multiply. My mom was like, you should have kids. And Brian literally is like, that was the command then. You know what our command is now? Our command is to make disciples.
Yeah.
Like, wow, why did I never register that? Like, we're supposed to now make more disciples.
so remember how we talked about the Old Testament and how does this apply? Is this a moral issue, a covenant
I don't have
issue, or a government issue?
You have.
So anyways,
This is just
a side
We're
note.
not under this covenant anymore, so I don't think it is a direct requirement for everyone.
Okay, we should go to the next one.
Yeah, we have different commands now. But yes, this verse definitely, and is used to like, hey, you've been married for like 3 months. Where's my grandkids? Be fruitful and multiply. I need grandkids.
It's like when people tell mom and your
That's-
your parents are like, we want more grandkids.
You better take note of
Look
this.
at Other people.
Yeah.
give you five.
I'll probably be quoting this verse to you, kids.
We're good.
All right, next verse, Genesis 2:18, Addison.
Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that a man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him."
Whoa. So, which does this verse support singleness?
No.
Is not good for a man to be alone. So I will make him a helper suitable.
They're looking at your friend Darren Weil and they're like, dude, Darren, it's not good for you to be
It's not
alone.
good for you to be alone.
You are maybe less qualified.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Oh, we love him. Go help him.
I want
Is
to.
that talking about like man and woman or
So this verse, again, that's a great question. So this is a specific to Adam. You know, God was looking at Adam and saying it's not good for Adam to be alone. But man, is that mankind?
Yeah.
Probably a little
What
broader.
did God have? Am I right in the sequence that God first had Adam name all the animals?
Mm-hmm.
So God would have, Adam would have seen that there is a lioness.
Right.
And there's am I saying this right? A lion and a lioness. There's differences. Adam would have just seen
A buck and a doe.
Adam would have just seen all of creation have
a mate for every animal.
So now, so God's doing this on purpose. God waited to create woman.
So Adam would have seen
God's design.
Yeah, but there was no one for him. Okay. Yep, he brought them to man. There it is. And then he caused him to fall in a deep sleep.
Oh.
Well, actually,
So
God said that right before he brought them all. So God knew, but he wanted to show Adam that it was not good for him to be alone.
I'm going to tell you it's not. And then to not be alone, and here's why.
And then he took room from Adam.
I don't think Adam minded at all. At last, the man exclaimed, "This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken from me."
At last, he said. So he's been longing.
That's how the NLT says it.
What is
At last.
What does your verse say?
What verse is that? It is not good for the man to be alone. I'll make him a helper fit for him.
So what verse were you reading with that last? I was just curious.
Oh, I just switched. It doesn't really say that in ESV. 23.
Verse 23.
Mine said, and the man said, "This one, at last, is born of my bone."
Okay.
Yeah. There is a I've heard that explained. There's an exclamation of joy when he sees woman. He's very excited. Okay, next verse, Ecclesiastes 4:9.
Two are
Fine.
better than one because they have a good reward for their toil.
Two are better than one.
So does this actually talk about marriage?
It's not talking about marriage specifically. It's talking about like camaraderie, strength in numbers, companionship, all that. So, not specifically talking about a man and a woman, not specifically talking about marriage, but biblically speaking, what is better, one or two people together?
Safety in numbers. I'm going to call this F for friendship.
It continues, it kind of explains why. Verse 10. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they can keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone?
My Bible says friendship.
Also, the very first one also has marriage and children. Multiplying, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's nothing in here. I mean, it might be kind of awkward, two guys cuddling to stay warm.
It's worse when it's a boy and a girl who are not married.
I guess so. And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Three. So, you know, like a braid of a rope. Yeah. Okay, next one. Proverbs 30:18-19. Who had that? Marshall?
There be three things which are too wonderful for me, yes, four which I know not. The way of an eagle in the air, the way of a serpent upon a rock, the way of a ship in the sea, and the way of a man with a mace.
So this is I like this verse. It's funny to me. Did you guys catch it? Do you guys understand what he's saying?
He's saying there's this mystery about stuff? Is that what it was?
These three things I don't understand. No, four. Three things are too wonderful for me to understand. Four I do not understand. So how does an eagle fly? Like, how does he do that? Soar in the sky. How does a serpent move on a rock? You know, like, look at that motion. Like, how does a ship sail on a high sea? And the way of a man with a woman, like a way the man loves a woman. When a man loves a woman, like, it's like unexplainable. I don't know why I threw this verse in, but I thought it was funny. What do you guys think? He doesn't understand love, but it's kind of amazing to observe, right?
I think that's kind of true. Every now and then, like, I'm trying to think back to our youth group days, and there was like a couple of people that got together, and I'm just like, Lord, you have made them perfectly for each other, and they're amazing, but they're just uniquely, like, trying not to like sound rude, like kind of like that's a perfect fit. Like, God, you perfectly designed them
Two weird people that just go great together.
Yeah, pretty much.
Somehow they complement all of each other's weirdness.
Like, that's
So,
God's design.
like, yeah, I think kind of speaking to that, God's design in people together. Okay, here's an interesting question in this. Two people, are they incomplete without another person? Like, is that how God has designed us, to be 50% until we find our other half?
Well, we have God to
Ooh, we have God to complete us. So that's kind of like this interesting
It's a challenge.
dynamic,
Are we
right?
incomplete
Are you
without-
less of a person if you're not married or if you don't have a spouse? Henry says, yes, you're less of a person. Or are you a whole person individually without a spouse?
No.
Henry, you're only 50% a person. You have no wife. This is going to be, you making these harsh statements is going to be judgment, because it's going to take until you're 42 and a half to find a woman. And you're going to be half a man till then.
Marriage. This is like the general view of marriage. Like, marriage isn't there to make you happy; it's to make you holy.
Yeah.
You're supposed to look at marriage and say, "I am better off with this person. I can love God better. I can serve God better with this person." Right? And you
yes.
don't have to have that person. You can still love God well and serve God well. I'm getting ahead.
Pro tip: if you want to find a spouse so bad, or a boyfriend or girlfriend, it's not attractive to be desperate, right? Like, and if you are lacking and you think that a boyfriend or girlfriend, husband or wife is going to satisfy, like, in the areas you lack, it's actually a potential idolatry, that you look at a person to fulfill the needs that God can fulfill in you. So if you feel unfulfilled, unsatisfied, if you feel like less of a person, Henry, you're not less of a person. What you're lacking is fulfillment in God. You need to get whole and satisfied and content in your relationship with God before you go looking for a person to spend your life with, because that person will not fulfill those needs either.
And
Like,
they'll let you down. You'll be
they're
dissatisfied.
not perfect people. Like, you're trying to fill your need for God with a person, and that won't work. And also, it's unattractive if you're desperate like that. People can smell that. It has a certain aura. Yes.
And that's kind of interesting. So, like, one of my favorite authors, Jodie Hedlund, she writes like just Christian romance, but back in the old days. And there's a pastor in the Church of England, and they didn't want him to get married. They're like, you'd be a better pastor or preacher without being married. So that's another side of saying
Well, we're gonna
Okay,
get
that's
that in Corinthians.
super interesting. I didn't even bring this up. It should have been.
That's how
But the Catholic Church, what do they do? What do they think about their priests, Micah? They can't get married. If you want to be a priest or a bishop, you can't get
They
married.
didn't want the family
So
to
why
be
do you?
involved.
And then nuns.
Yeah.
Can nuns get married?
No.
No.
This is I was thinking about. That's why I had. This
So the
question.
Catholic Church has probably a different view of singleness as a higher priority than the evangelical church.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
I
That's
they
a
didn't
very
want
much
the
way it's
family to
played
get
out.
in the way of their ministry and not make decisions based on their family, but
Yeah.
just be putting your whole self there and not think that I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. Addison.
In my book, the counselors, they're not allowed to get married because they're going to make decisions if it's related to their family. It's going to.
So they can be a better leader
Yeah.
without being married because you're not tied to family.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to Corinthians. So far we have 4 verses emphasizing marriage and family, right? Wow. Okay, 1 Corinthians 7:6-9. Wiley.
Now, as a concession, not a command, I say this. I wish that all were as I myself am, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. To the unmarried and the widows I say that it is good for them to remain single, as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn in passion.
All right, we have a verse on the other side now.
So I want to clarify. Paul is single and
Paul, yes.
I say this. That you can all be like, I wish you were like me.
Yeah.
Single.
Paul is single. He is emphasizing singleness here. I wish you were all as I am, single, right?
And see,
But each has his own gift from God.
And he starts with, I say this as a concession, not a command.
Yes, and Catholics would probably use this verse as it is best to be single. Now, here's an interesting thing. Do Catholics think Paul was the first pope?
No.
Who do they think Paul was the first pope?
Yep.
Peter.
And he was married.
Was Peter married?
Yeah.
Yes. Do we know his wife's name? No, we don't hear anything about his wife, but we hear about his mother-in-law. You don't get a mother-in-law without getting married. So, the very first pope person Catholics call Peter the first pope.
We don't call him that.
He was, but anyway, among the apostles, among the leaders of God, there were married people and there were single people. Paul was single, Peter was married. The two of the biggest leaders, kind of identified in the early church, Peter and Paul. One was married, one wasn't. So,
You want me to go to my verse now?
Paul is saying it's better. Why does he say it's better?
Well,
I think he's saying more why later, right?
My verse. He's like,
and-
you can't control yourself.
Right.
Please
So
go
it's
get
almost
married.
like a concession, right? And to the unmarried, and the widows, so, spouses died, I say it's good for them to remain single, as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, speaking sexually, they should marry, for it's better to marry than burn with passion. So, he's saying it's better to be single, but if you have this strong desire to be married, you should be married than try to just it's better that I be married, but it's tormenting you inside. Okay, the last verse, Corinthians.
1 Corinthians
7:32.
32 to 35. I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs. How he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife. And his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way in undivided devotion to the Lord.
Wow. So what does this verse say? Marriage or singleness is better? Singleness. Why?
Because
Their tensions are not divided. They can be focused on the Lord's work and not on, their family and their family affairs. Think of how easy it is for a single person to move to a new place, right? They don't have kids in school. They don't have their wife's family or their husband's family. Like they can much more simply move to where God wants them to do. A married person has more ties tied down to this world, right? Like if God told me to go to a new place, to a new country, it would be much more difficult, and maybe I would feel like that's not the right thing. I might miss out on the call of God because I'm like, but my kids, they're in school, and my wife, her family's here, and all these things, and my job and providing, it's more expensive for me to survive because I have more mouths to feed, all these things. If I was a single man, it would be easier for me to just, take my van out of park and just drive away. Tied in to the van comments, right? If I just lived in a van, I could go wherever God wanted me to be. It's hard to live in a van with 7 kids or 5 kids. How many do I have? So, why is Paul emphasizing singleness here as a better option?
Because their tensions are undivided and they're forcing God.
But what about the commands to be fruitful and multiply? Are those conflicting commands?
Yes.
Sounds like it, right?
From
What
Lord,
covenant-
all the laws of the Old Testament.
What is the Great Commission and the Great Commandment for the people after Jesus? To make disciples of all nations. That is number one priority. Number one priority for Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply, right? They need to fill the earth. No longer is be fruitful and multiply the number one command. Now the number one command is go into all the world and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And lo, I'm with you always, to the end of the age. That is the main goal. So here's, and it kind of referred to it. What did it say in the other one? 7, 6 to 9. Each one has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. So here's where I'm leaving this. I think it is an incredible gift to be single. And I believe it is a gift God can give you, and you can be satisfied and fulfilled and be able to serve God in a greater way if God has given you that gift of singleness. But I totally agree with Paul. Like, it's way better to get married rather than burn with passion. Like, if you're going to be a single person, but it's going to like distress you constantly that you're not married, like, it's better to be married. And it's still good to be married. It's a wonderful gift to be married. To some have the gift of singleness and some have the gift of marriage. One, I don't think is better than the other. One has more opportunities for serving God and expanding his kingdom. Marriage is probably the best way to grow in a relationship with God, which is weird. But marriage is like this person that you're completely open with, that sees all your faults, and that helps you be better. Like in a marriage that's focused on God, grows you as a person, because there's someone that knows all your flaws and all your imperfections and can help you work on sanctification in a way that a single person can't. So there's both positives to each. There's positives to each one, and it's really what God has led you in your life to be. And maybe it can even be temporary. Like maybe, you wait later to get married, and maybe you did have that gift of singleness in your 20s or whatever, and God used you for great things, and then God changes your heart and circumstances so that you can be married. What are you going to say, Henry? Sorry.
Once you get married, you can't
Once you get married, you can't leave marriage. Correct. So Paul is also instructing, like, don't desire singleness if you're married. Like, it's better for you to stay as you are. But don't, like, if you end up as a widow, like, your life isn't over until you find someone else. And to all of you single people in this room, you are not half a person. You are not like 50% of a person till you get married. Like, you don't fulfill your life. Like, God can use you for great things. I think it's a shame that churches would look down on someone who may very well, I mean, you should, like, do they burn with passion? Is this a problem in their life that they're single? Or has God gifted them with singleness and for his purposes and great use? Like, literally, my youth pastor, the youth pastor here at Grace before me, Josh Yates, so I saw him as a single person. I guess he was dating. His fiance was far away. And I saw him as a married youth pastor. I got to spend a lot more time with him as a single youth pastor because he didn't have a wife. I remember him having to sit us down like, guys, my wife is going to be living here soon. You can't just show up whenever you want at my house. Like, she lives here too now. You can't just hang out whenever you want. You got to call me first, kind of thing. Because we would just go over to his house all the time and just hang out there all night because he was a single youth pastor. And so in one way, he had more time with his students than he did after he was married. But he also had more to teach us, and he grew as a person after he was married.
So
Ellie.
We should do another question about divorce.
Divorce. We should do a question. That's a good one. Divorce. We should do one on divorce.
I added something to the chart that Brian doesn't know about. This is something I wrote down yesterday. So there's people who are going to be long to be married, and God hasn't given them a spouse yet, and they'll compromise. Okay? They're going to say, well, he loves me, and it's okay that we're not married, or we're going to get married anyway. Or we start saying, because our heart is longing, and we're waiting, we will decide to take it into our own hands, and we'll compromise on what God says. So we'll compromise on our purity. We'll compromise on our faith. Maybe you'll date someone who's not a Christian because they really like you. Okay? Boys, kids. So when we take God's gift, marriage is a gift. When we take these relationships out of God's timing, it's actually showing that we don't trust him. Because trusting him requires patience. And we have to trust him with the timing. And we have to trust him to bring us the right person, of the right faith, of the right age, whatever. So this is just an echo, like when we are taking God's gifts, like marriage or sexual relationship or just a spouse or kids out of, without marriage, we're not trusting God with our heart, is what it boils down to. So, random thing, but I totally wrote that down yesterday while I was listening to a message, and I think this ties in. You might long for it, and you might not get it. And God's way is way better. You're going to end up with heartbreak and issues. I mean, we're going to have issues in marriage too, don't get me wrong. But I mean, like, if you have a boyfriend who you're living with, and then you have a kid together, and then you're like not committed, and then you break up, and now you've got a kid with the dad in another town, that's super, super hard, okay? Like, please be patient with God's timing for your heart's desires, because his way is always the best and gonna have the least issues.
Yeah. And be satisfied with your position, single or married. Trust God to help you in that spot. You are a complete whole person, regardless of if you're married. You shouldn't be sad you're married because like you can't do as much. Like you can take your family to wherever God would call you. Like then that can hold you back, but you can still serve God with your life as a married, as a family. So final answer.
I wrote it on there.
Should all Christians get married?
No.
No, I don't think we should say that. All Christians should get married. It's the best thing. But most probably should. And seeing in our culture, in the kind of, instead of burning with passion, yeah, it's going to protect us from a lot of that. It's good for us. But singleness is a gift that God can use for his kingdom in great ways. Do not diminish that gift. Many of us will end up married, and marriage is an incredible relationship to help us grow in Christ. Like by, having another person who's a believer too, that's super important. And the two of you working on your relationship together, because no one will ever know you like a husband or a wife will know you. It's a very intimate relationship that they get to know everything about you. They see you at your best and at your worst. They see all of it. And it's a special relationship for God to use to continue to shape you to be more like him. But singleness too. Don't be discouraged in singleness. Try to affirm single people as you grow up, as church happens, whether you get married or not. I would hope that you can be affirmed in your singleness and used by God in your singleness, not just looking for married people to do ministry and to do work and to serve. That is a bad use of people and God's gifts. Boom. Thanks, everybody.
Boom.